I am now. Probably. Yes. So I'm assuming that the interface is relatively familiar if people have been trying to model out their projects and whatnot. Revit is, for all its various failings, really super nice for getting drawings out of, in that it is intrinsically already about architectural drawing conventions. Like, nothing else calls this view a plan, right? Any other piece of software is going to call this a top view. Conveniently, this is a plan. This is even a plan that occurs, whatever, 1.2 meters off the ground. Normally, when you're making something like this, you would start with doing grids, like Branko mentioned. That's like occurs probably fairly shortly after sort of conceptual design. You'd start thinking about how your project gets ordered, and the sort of the normal one is your structural grid. But grid lines are really just ways of keeping track of things in space. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to place some grids onto this thing, understanding that typically you do that before you built the model, but I want to draw the grids. You guys can watch me fail at building a Revit model, and then we can talk about annotation, so we'll just talk about annotation. The grid button is in your architecture tab, and is the hotkey GR. Mousing over anything will give you the 2-letter command for it if there is one already bound, so that's quite convenient. So if we click our grid command, we get, again, a few different ways of producing it in our little modify place panel here that basically all commands have. So we can draw a grid from a line. We can draw I believe we can do a curving grid, which is pretty neat. Yeah, an arced grid, which is a thing that may come up if your project is primarily organized around like a curve or a radial kind of layout. We can also pick something that's already in our file, get a grid. That might be really nice if you're bringing in like a 2D drawing and you want to get some grids to start placing things in Revit. Grids are also, like if you want to draw things that exist vertically, or that, like two-dimensional things in a vertical orientation, you need to draw them on a grid plane. So you might want to draw grids to get like even just lines defined to start thinking about your building. We can go through and start sticking some grids in this thing. Because we've got this arc, we can imagine, say, like hypothetically, that what we're doing here is that there's going to be some sort of structure that kind of comes back and forth through here that's not imaged in the resolution of this file. So we might do something like start by defining a grid that just sort of hits this wall, and then we're going to do like a splay of grids around the arc and then move along through this straight part. Since normally you would do letters in the, whatever that is, the horizontal, and numbers in the vertical in a plan drawing, and since we're going to curve this around, we're going to pretend this is, we're going to change this to be a letter. So if you click on the little bubble for your grid, you can edit what it says. You can change it to be like whatever, a different number if for some reason they're in a weird order or something. But if you set it to a letter, subsequent grids you draw will come in already lettered. And I believe, although have not tested it, that the same is true if you go switch back to numbers. So all I'm doing here is I'm just clicking one point and then like moving my mouse out and clicking again to place the other end of the grid line. And then I'm pressing escape in between because it gets all weird and doesn't like it if you try and place one directly on top of the end of another one, which sort of makes sense because this is a fairly uncommon use case, although definitely a thing I've seen in an actual building. And then, for instance, if we want, now that we've got these, we might probably structure in these walls. I'm pressing tab to scroll through my options and selecting. Oh, that's gross. So instead of manipulating that, because that seems unpleasant, I'm going to go ahead and just draw things that follow these walls. And of course, we got these like really nice sort of automatic snap relationship type stuff, where all I'm doing here is I'm just moving it up. It's giving me this little implied line between them, and now we can see that this is locked here, which means that if I do something with one, I'm doing something with all, and that is a thing that just occurs implicitly. if for some reason I need one in a different spot, like if there's, I don't know, say there's like a tree or something here and it's really cluttered and weird, I can click the unlock and set one independently of the other. Typically, like I can't, off the top of my head, think of a really good reason to want to unlock them on a parallel thing like this. Normally, it's fine that they're locked. For our horizontal grids, it's the exact same horizontal. Vertical, our other set of grids. Actually, I think you can do a thing where you apply a wall. Oh yeah, multi-segment would be. I have not tried this. We're going to find out how this works. It's an adventure. So I'm, again, just using tab to scroll through my choices, and I've selected this curve that defines this arc and this wall. And something is, oh, yeah. So the weirdness that's going on here is right here, there's a weird little overlapping problem. So I'm just going to undo back out of this, and we're going to draw it in by hand. So I'm just going to define, this is a start end radius, I believe. Yeah, which is the order you do them in. So that's kind of convenient. So I'm just going to define that as my start. This is my end, and then my radius can be anywhere along this, and it will give me the correct curve. So that's fine. Panning over with middle click, I'll switch to a just a straight line. Snap that in. Heck, let's make it a little long. And now I believe that, well, yeah. So now we've got a grid that defines this curve here. Which should be really nice for instance, locating things as a linear dimension from, say, like this point along all the way around the curve. So I'm going to change this to a 1. And if I'm correct about how this works, having, again, not tested this, I should be able to now, if I draw this one, get, yeah, a 2. And a 3. And so grids are necessary, I believe, I'm correct in saying, for placing columns in Revit. I could be wrong about that. They're also very useful for sort of ordering your thinking and ordering what the building, how the building goes together, and what the building is. Although typically are like not a conceptual design thing, but more of a how you actually realize your design. So with some grids laid in here, we can move into, let's talk about dimensioning, I guess. So in the annotation tab of the ribbon, got a whole bunch of different options that are basically dimensioning. Is everyone good with grids? Are we good to keep moving? Any questions about grids? Anything? Everyone's cool? Awesome. Given that Revit this is its intended use case, it makes this very friendly compared to a lot of things, in that if I throw in a dimension string, the text in the dimension string will be set by the scale of the drawing, ready to go, and will propagate through all drawings that would show that dimension string. So in like if you wanted to do drawings like this in Rhino, you would like cut your sections and then you would go in and annotate them. Here you're totally fine to annotate anywhere you like, anywhere that's convenient to look at the thing you're doing, and then trust that it will propagate through into the drawings that we're going to look at in a hot minute here. So dimension commands. Aligned, or DI for the hotkey, is very useful in that you can relate it to pre-existing walls very easily. So we've got a few different ways to sort of think about walls. Here we can think about the wall face, the center line, center of core, faces of core. We're going to stick with center line for the moment. And we can either pick individual references, which will give us like one little part, I believe. Okay. So individual references, you like pick one point, you pick another point. It gives you the dimension perpendicular to the first thing you select. If we instead go entire walls, this is the one that's super cool, I think, and go options, we can just tell it to procedurally dimension all the openings in a wall, which is pretty neat. So I can just say, let's say I like this wall, I want to know how far these windows are apart. get to see how like rigorously I built this model in a second here. And I just click on the wall with that option set and entire walls as my pick type, and that's the entire dimension string for that entire wall. Ready to go and true to the Revit file, which is funny because historically doing a closed dimension string like this is kind of, it's a bold move perhaps, just in that then you're trusting that all your math's correct throughout your like set of documents, whereas if you leave the last one blank, like the contractor can work it out. But the future, BIM, it's true, it's accurate. So we got this dimension string along a nice regular face here. So just to do that again, I'm in my Align tool, hotkey DI. I selected wall center line. I'm picking the entire wall, and I've set to reference the openings in it. So you can do grids, which is kind of nice. I'm going to click a wall and just pull a dimension string off of it. Do turn off openings, turn on grids, for instance, and do the same thing on this wall. And now it's just showing the spacing between the grids where they relate to that wall. So it's really super quick for populating out various types of, just like whatever types of dimensions, linear dimensions that follow a wall you need. That's whatever. Super weird distance. So that's all fine, and I think pretty straightforward. I don't know, does anyone have any concerns or anything about how we're doing these just like straight dimensions that follow a wall? Everyone's okay?
Show him how to then do the next one that is just within the main grid line, let's say horizontally, and that one that shows the overall dimension, so between G to G.
Oh, like the total?
Yes.
Yeah. So if I click on the grid line in the Align tool, and just click on the next grid line, I get the value that is the total of everything.
So then you would want to move the grid references higher.
Yeah.
And then with the should be the one for this wall.
Yeah.
So don't be a bad way of annotating the drawing. You don't want this dimension on the grid references.
Oh. This one?
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, well, it looks like my dimension line is now associated.
Some Revit prods in the class, which is great.
Which is fantastic.
So, and identify them early, and if you need help, go after them first. And then,
So, linear dimensions, if we're happy with that, which are we happy? Anyone? Anything about any of this? Cool. Let's talk about the reason I put this curved thing in here, which is the various ways you might dimension a curvy thing. So, got a few choices. Angular dimension is going to create a thing that tells us what this angle is, defined by a start and an end point, I believe, unless, yeah. So I would like pick this wall down here, maybe. Yeah, there we go. I pick the one, pick the other, and it will define the angle between them, which for some reason is 89.5262 degrees, so that's a little weird, but you know. This is not, I think, a particularly common approach in the case of a curved wall. That would be more typically used if you've got like that kind of thing, and we need to know the relationship between these two, where you might say, you know, so if you've got a building with like walls intersecting at weird angles, you may need to define the angle of those walls to each other. Although I mean, like maybe you use it on this, but I don't know, it seems a little dubious to me. The big ones are your radial dimension, which is very important for defining curves. And so I'm just clicking on the curve, and it's just showing, it's just producing that this is the point that is the center of the curve, the radius of the curve, and just giving me a number for it, which I believe I can then scoot, yeah, out of the way, just by grabbing the little blue doodad. So this is very useful in that you might, for instance, if you're actually building this thing, when you've got your site surveyed out, you would keep track of where this point is, and then be able to attach like a line to this point and check that you're placing these things correctly because they are defined as a radius off a particular point. So that's like very useful when you're actually trying to build a round thing. If you've got a more complex curve, if it is a curve that is a collection of radial pieces, defining the radiuses that define the curve, the pieces of the curve, can be useful. If it's a like third-degree continuity curve, I don't believe that will be possible because the radius should be moving as it moves along the curve. Hopefully, that's like third-degree continuity stuff is where you start thinking about sending your contractor a digital file. The other thing that's important for something like this becomes arc length, which is just how long this curve is. I'm tired. So I'm just clicking at each end and then pulling it off, and this is just giving me the like the unrolled length of this thing, how long that is if we're to straighten it out. And we're going to go ahead and do the thing that makes this a little less hideous, and we're just going to shoot.
Thank you, Steve.
Fixing this, which apparently I don't know how to do. Anyone feel like helping me out here? Oh, this line? Thank you. So we've got the, you should keep your dim strings aligned with each other if you can. It is much easier to look at. What other dimension cases are present in this thing?
So how many Revit pros do we have in the room? Or knowledgeable Revit users? Just raise your hand proudly up. So okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, that's good. So there's enough expertise in the room.
Can you think of any types of dimensions you would like me to put in here that I haven't already, Branko?
Oh, this is good. This is
Yeah.
enough to get this done.
Okay. So we can talk about callouts and stuff, which he will be doing in general and in this project. The text tool, again in the annotation tab, hotkey TX. I sure don't want to save this project. You guys should. I'm not going to. Brings up our little modify place text palette here. These are for defining this style of leader associated with the text. So no leader is just going to dump some text on there, which is fine. A straight leader is as it sounds. To place the leaders, click once and then click again and then type your text, or click once, click twice, click again for leaders that have 2 points in them. Will give us just a straight line to our text, which is fine. I really like the 2-line. I think it looks pretty cute. So placing once and then clicking again, and then if you hit escape, it will go away. If you hit enter, you get hard returns. You click outside the text field to make the text real. So this is the sort of thing where you call out like just about anything that needs to get noted on a drawing. In a more schematic type thing, you might call out experiential things or key design elements. In a construction type thing, you might call out like something in particular that you don't want jacked up that isn't also imaged elsewhere. We can produce tags in Revit very easily, which I believe are a thing for marking something for a particular trade, although I've never actually used them. The thing that is, I think, very cool, though, is the way it does, where is it? It's it not in this one?
This is where you could actually make good use of those reference books that I highlighted. So there you would find step-by-step descriptions of how to add particular annotations to your drawings. So do check them out so that you simply have some idea of where that stuff is.
Definitely check them out before you get to comprehensive. They'll make your life much less painful than mine was. If we want to draw detail, which I understand you guys don't have to do for Saturday, but I mean it will come up eventually.
Do it for Wednesday.
Oh, perfect. Then let's talk about it now. If you're doing a detail and plan, you've got the callout function in the View tab. You click on this, undo a thing, little whatever. Our cursor turns into a thing that tells us we're about to do something. Click and drag, defining a boundary, and then we get a little. Yeah, that will be associated with a particular sheet in the document. Okay, this is the one I want. There we go. Your horrifying elbow. Where is it?
It's up. Let me see.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Double clicking in the view that we've just produced, they can get labeled. Well, for a drawing package, needs to get labeled properly. For our purposes, does not necessarily. It will produce a view, which is just the area we've bounded. And the reason this is nice is that we can now set this to be at a different scale than the plan it's associated with. So, like at a 1 to 100 plan, we're never going to see how these two walls associate, how they attach to the column, where the insulation goes. Would not be imaged at this scale. It would totally be imaged at this scale. And so I've put not in the file that's on the D2L, a thing I did a hot minute ago during the lecture, was just to put some materiality on this wall, so we can start to see how, as we come in on at a higher scale, we start to see that there's a cladding on this wall, and that sort of thing. In the interface down here at the bottom, we have different detail views. It's this little button right here. This defines the resolution to which the drawing occurs on the screen. So we'll just set it to fine to see more of what's going on here. If we want a section,
and all of that information is actually embedded in the definition of the wall. So when you're defining, when you're using a particular wall type, it will contain info about the kind of various materials that are sandwiched between the exterior and interior surface of the.
which is what's so crazy about Revit compared to any other way of doing these drawings. Having done drawings like this and not Revit, this is pretty intense. If we want to section it, in the View tab, we have a little section function. Is pretty much what you would expect. Click and drag, or click and click, I guess. By placing a section line in our plan view, we've created a section view of the building. So if we come over here, we can see a section that has go back to the plan. The extents of this drawing are the extents of this line. So it's like if in our section, you can see how this is partially cut off. It's partially cut off because it's here. So if we were to expand that down, go back to our section. Well, I am sure wrong about that. That's neat. You can. Oh, it's not. It's right. Okay, there's the second line. Thank you. Which is the where is it? Right. Thank you. This is a UI element present throughout Revit, so you'd think I would be familiar with it.
So it is these little things that are going to drive you nuts in Revit. Like, why is this not showing up? And, figuring out where to click on which bit of the symbol is actually kind of necessary knowledge. That's why you will find those reference books useful, or your prospects, if they're willing to talk to you.
Hold on here. With our section view, we can also in the section view change how it's cropped, and yeah, and we can also make it really teeny, so that in a second here, when we set this to say 1 to 10, and set our fine, it is not nearly as interesting as I was hoping it would be. I may have cut through a wall that doesn't have a lot going on. You can produce a section detail that, well, there's a window there. There's something going on. Sorry? The window behind? Right. Let's actually cut through a window then. You guys tell I don't use Revit a ton? Is that coming across? So I feel like that might be coming across.
This is what you're going to learn in detail. Like the moment you leave the school, let's say this summer, if you get a job, or this summer in an office, and they happen to be using Revit, like this is what your life will be about. Like it will be about creating drawings of this kind. And the offices will have their own standards as to how you do things in Revit, and they will differ from office to office. So, did you work in an office? Yeah. So, anybody else who worked in an office that used Revit? Okay. So, it's widespread, so to speak. You will find this in many offices. And the reason that the firms embrace it is that we still, as a second admin, produce tons of drawings. And the nice thing about the Revit is that if you make a change in the drawing, let's say if you move one of the walls or windows, it would actually update not only the 3D model, but all the other drawings will be updated automatically. So you have an accurate representation of the building, like as you manipulate its geometry in any of the views, whether it's a drawing or a kind of 3D view. So that's the kind of beauty of it, and that's why the architects find it compelling. That's why they embrace it for using.
Speaking of that, I think we can perhaps look at how putting together a sheet works. In the view ribbon, we have a sheet button, which will bring up this dialog box. We can load a title block. We can define our own title blocks. Title blocks are families in the Revit sense. For the moment, we'll just stick with the default one, the A0. Autodesk, yay. Every firm ever has their own title block. Some of them are super weird.
If I'm going to interject for a second, so here is that reference for the drawing that will be placed in the callouts, like when you put a section for the details, and then I would suggest you kind of invent your own logo. Think of your own architectural firm, give it a name, and it's perfectly legit to include that in your submissions for somebody. So think of John Brown Incorporated. If you want to give it an interesting name. Minus Architecture, like is the name of Jason Johnson's firm. So, why would you call it Minus Architecture? I'll have to ask Jason that question at some point. Josh's is synthetics and so on. So think of the kind of the name you would give your firm. If you have a bit of time for the logo, include the logo in the title sheet and so on. So this title sheet would contain, we expect one with the plan and one with the section. That's all you got to do. Dimension and annotate for somebody.
So going as far as you guys are going on Sunday is really straightforward in Revit. I'm going to click and drag a floor plan. I'll just drag it in there. There you go. There's a plan of the building. This blew my mind the first time I did it. It's absolutely floored me. It's a little small for the sheet, so if we go back to our floor plan here and change this, let's say we want to make it 1 to 50. Now if we go to our sheet, which is Where in the sheet is that located?
You click on that,
Sorry, which?
click on the floor plan, and then under properties, you scale, up in the left.
Which is left? That's the thing that just occurred to me.
The properties dialog box.
This dialog box on the left. Oh, other left. Of course, thank you. I was looking on the right, and I'm like, which is left? So, you know, good times. It's so yeah, you can set it here, but this will also will this also affect the sheet or the this? Yeah, like they're locked together, right? Yeah. Which is sort of speaking to that thing that Branko was mentioning, just in terms of making it very quick if like, oh, it's actually needs to be this other scale, done, right? It also means that some weird stuff, like you can go in and adulterate your file, like change your building on your sheet, which I think is pretty cool.
I cannot emphasize enough the kind of fundamental difference between a tool such as AutoCAD and Revit. AutoCAD doesn't have this intelligence that is built into Revit. So in AutoCAD, things are done manually. You manually have to change the drawings, change the models, the sections, move something in plan, you would have to manually correct the sections and so on. It's so labor intensive, it's mind-boggling. I'm trying to imagine these all days when things were done by hand. How painful that was and how time-consuming that was. And how relatively easy it is now to do in Revit. What is tricky in Revit is to get it to do exactly what you want. Like if you want that detail to show the kind of proper composition, iconic composition of the corner of the building, and that is going to require some effort in Revit to get it right. Especially if you have two walls that are not identical in terms of how they're articulated. And you know, special conditions is what makes life in Revit different.
It's very easy to let Revit be the designer, and you're serving Revit. I've seen that happen entirely too many times.
You're just adding more drawings to the sheet.
Yeah, I'm just dragging them in as I was before. But if we, I don't know, hop over to our 3D view or something, and I don't know, start deleting some stuff here. Yeah, sure. How about that whole wall? The important part is that there is no longer a wall in the drawing. So you can be working both on your drawings and on your model concurrently, which is huge. Yeah, I feel like that more or less covers the things. Anything?
That's it.
Anyone who's, any of the Revit whiz kids here have any pro tips they want to get in this recording? So their classmates bug them less?
I think this is more than enough to get them started. The expectation this week is that you'll complete the remodeling of your house that you designed last term. Some of you may have interest in geometries, and if you do have interest in geometries, you're going to have an interesting time getting them remodeled in Revit. This is where you would turn to your TAs for help, or your classmates who are also knowledgeable about Revit. So the point is to complete the model this week and just quickly produce two drawings, annotating drawings, as demonstrated just in the past half an hour by Steve. So just one plan and one section, and then we'll look for that complete set by Steve. There was a hand that went up.
So I have like a really bizarre long shape in my building, like half of it.
Lucky you.
Yeah, so how would I like annotate that?
Oh, that's a good question. So, think about if that thing is to be built, and if you were to, simply engage in the kind of permitting process, you have to reduce it to paper in some fashion. So you'll have to identify, and imagine somebody going to the building site, and they have to kind of lay this thing down. What are the kind of essential bits of geometry that you would have to capture in your Well, maybe you do have a few cross sections. So you just show, say they ask you for two, and you place it in quite a few.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, he does. And if something is amiss, then you would have to kind of go in and fix it. And there are ways to kind of state your preferences.
You can set up templates to all your tool times that how they come to be the same, and how you will be the same over the
No, it's really an amazing piece of software, but as I say, where it drives into bunkers is like when you have a particular problem that you need to have resolved. And if it's anything out of the norm, you're going to have a bit of a challenge. It's doable, but figuring out how to do it is not easy.
Other questions before we?
Okay, so all clear on what is expected.